Consumers have a lot of options today. We don't see a lot of consistency. We don't see a lot of persistence with process.
Well, you have to reshape your business model to where maybe you have to look at your fixed ops, or you have to look at your back end.
Like, where can you buy a car that you can buy it at 85% cost to market?
Aren't you just leaving yourself in that same tricky void of not understanding how to then grow your business?
Well, Darrell, it's not going to get any easier. That's for sure. I don't see signs that are pointing to this becoming easier.
They know what they're going to get, and they drive that business.
We do one thing, and we do one thing well. We can't get onto a relationship with failed expectations from the start. That's not good business.
Are you wasting your time and money on inefficiencies in the business? Are sales down and lead conversion rates are low? Are you having problems building or maintaining inventory levels? What does it really take to win in the automotive industry?
Get the cars that make sense for your store rather than just wishing at an auction, so it gives you that better control.
With over 25 years of experience, Darrell the Wolf Steed isn't just another industry voice. He's the guy who's out there solving real problems for dealers just like you.
They'll even say in the Pacific Northwest where you're at that it's a tougher market. It's, it's tougher to find cars. The market's a little bit softer. And in the midst of all this, your turn doubled and your profit's up 75%.
Yes.
The truth hurts only when it should. Are you ready to hear the truths? Darrell is here to unpack the hard truths and the proven strategies that will take your dealership from struggling to soaring. And he is taking it all in the streets, with real talk, open dialogue, unfiltered conversations. This is the podcast series, Street Smarts, powered by Smartwolf Consulting.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Street Smarts, powered by Smartwolf Consulting. As we talk about all types of topics, from education to solutions to what's going on in the industry, and really making sure that we focus on getting better every time we come together and giving you guys some actionable intel to make things happen. Now, today we actually get to have somebody on here that has done some really innovative things and continues to push the needle in innovation of how we can get better and really attack the industry. He's a friend of mine and somebody that I partner with closely. Gregg has created the very first, we'll say he's the OG of private party aggregation and integration way back in the day in the 2010 eras, way back then, and continues to push the needle and giving dealers the opportunity to get more efficient and take control, which oddly enough takes control from the streets and brings it into your store. So with no further ado, let's welcome Gregg to the show. Tom, thanks so much for coming on, and I look forward to the topics we're going to cover today.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Now, Tom, you've been doing this for quite some time. Before you created and founded Van, you were in the used car space and the sales automotive space. And we've seen, quite a few things in the years that you've been going on. But if you could, for the viewers, kind of give us the roadmap of what you did before, why you founded Van, and why we see today it's more important than ever to really attack that, the acquisition strategy in a store.
Yeah, thanks, Darrell. I started in the car business at the age of 16. I was a porter. I began selling cars at 18. I had an early opportunity to become a sales manager at a Toyota dealer in the city of Chicago at the age of 21. I don't have any ties family-wise to the auto industry, but I've always had a fascination and an affinity for cars. And I've always pushed myself, and I found selling to be quite challenging, and really worked hard to overcome some of the issues there. And it really led me into a career I spent almost 15 years, a little bit over 15 years, in fact, in all facets of the variable operation side. So from finance to new cars to used cars. And during the years, I really found the three pillars of success that I had revolved around used cars, utilizing technology for efficiency. And I spent a number of years leading a really large BDC at the last store that I worked at. And that gave me some perspective to really think prop up van to be a culmination of the three areas that I was strongest: used cars, technology, and call center. So so during those years, how I came up with the van was really a challenge that I struggled buying cars at the auction. I guess I was early in sucking at the auction, so that really led me to find other ways that I was going to acquire cars. As a used car manager, I really fought to be 1-to-1, one used to one new relative to the new car department. And in those days, this is going back to 2010 and even a little bit before that, focus on being 1-to-1 used to new really pushed me to acquire cars. And as I was trying to go to the auction using vAuto's technology, I couldn't buy cars in the range that vAuto was suggesting that I should pay. So it really challenged me to where I could find cars. And so I started looking and wondering, I was at a Toyota dealer, and we would sell these trades that were typically $10,000 Camrys or $15,000 Siennas. You can probably double those values in today's dollars, but we would get these cars in on trade and we would sell them within days. So I started wondering, like, where can I find these low price point cars on product? So Toyotas or things that we would typically sell fast or frequently. And I found myself just looking at cars on Craigslist and AutoTrader and reaching out to those individuals. And I found the experience to be very repetitive, where I was doing the same searches every day. I was reaching out to sellers, typically through the forum. And I was asking myself, I was using vAuto on one side, having success in leveraging efficiencies through the technology, and then wondering, how can I automate the aggregation of these listings and then automate the engagement to the sellers, just with a message from me saying, "I'm Tom, I want to make you an offer to buy your car," and then dealing with the responders. So the people that knew I was a dealer, knew my interest, and then dismissing the rest. We realized that not all private sellers want to deal with a dealer, and that's okay. And I wanted to utilize my time to focus on the people that did want to talk to a dealer. And that led me to talk to Dale Pollock, and really to cross somebody that I looked at in the industry with immense amount of respect, still do today. Dale's been, I would say, one of the most impactful people on my career. And I had a chance to meet him and kind of share my ideas. And Dale counseled me, just sat down with me, talked about what I would need to do to go out and to build a product, to go through all the steps. And I didn't have most of what Dale suggested, but I took one step at a time. And fast forward now, that was in 2011 when I sat down with Dale. And today, we have dealers all throughout the US, Canada, Puerto Rico. And we're helping dealers to acquire cars from private sellers. And, it's really changed a lot. Darrell, you mentioned about like some of the challenges dealers are faced with today. It's really ebbed and flowed, and there's often a new challenge. And once we solve one, there's one on the other side of that one. Specifically, were the issues that dealers are often faced with today. When we look at, there's 9 million cars that didn't get produced between 2020 and 2023. So that changed the scope for a lot of people, and it continues to become a challenge. So it's clear that there's a scarcity with inventory, which puts pressure on retailers to come up with new ways, because there are fewer cars out there.
Sure.
Range of used cars that didn't get produced. So if those cars did not get produced and there's a need for those cars, it's going to drive the demand because the supply is low. So it's really augmented how dealers are going about acquiring inventory, because going to the auction, that's not a very profitable venture where dealers are having to pay upper 90s or even above 100% to acquire the car. It's the norm.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny you say that. So probably 10 minutes before we got on this podcast, and as everybody, if you guys don't know, there is no rehearsals to these podcasts. As we go live and we let the conversation go where it goes. But I got a text message from a client saying, "Hey man, we're not making money. We're losing a little bit of money on these cars. We need to negotiate better, and we need to buy stuff that we can floor, because the cheaper stuff is so." And I thought that was interesting, because immediately the conversation I just sent back and said, "Okay, let's have a conversation about it," was that's the new challenge is, well, with the scarcity of inventory and then not having a strategy, if you went to the auction, you said, hey, you know what? I'm not going to do private party. I'm going to go to the auction. I'm going to live there. Typically your private party, third party lead conversion, things of that nature, you're acquiring the car for less than what you'd pay at the auction in most cases. And then you're avoiding transport and fees. So if you're struggling with a retail environment and figuring out how to be profitable and how to find the right, what happens if you're leaning on the auction, right? Like if you have a better acquisition price point on the private party and you're like, no, that's not working. Your only other option is that you pay more. So I think it's interesting that a lot of dealers are finding excuses of why they can't do this rather than having to look at the business differently. Maybe profit comes from fixed ops. Maybe profit comes from back end. Maybe it's not what we knew it to be in early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. It's not what we thought it to be when this first got created, when you first created Van. My first buying center was in 2010 and 11. And I have no problem saying building and operating a buying center then was significantly easier than what you're dealing with now. One, the abundance of inventory. Two, interest rates. I mean, there's a lot of moving factors. When you see dealers that are, they're going after that, or the ones that do make used car a focus for their operations, where do you see their biggest challenges now? Is it inventory, people, process? Like, where do you see their biggest challenges to be successful in today's dynamic?
Well, we had an invitation from a large auto group to come and speak to their executive managers actually next week. And as I was preparing for the talk, really we came up with the thing that keeps circling, and that's people, process, and price. And I'll expand beyond that a little bit more. It's not just having the right people; it's also having the right people that have the right incentives, or a pay plan that's really modified to help them to focus on what's important to the organization. So you hit on something right there, Darrell, which is making money on either fixed ops or the back end more than being so focused on the profit of the car. And as an example, I was speaking to a dealer last week and I was asking him, like, why are you not buying these cars? And we had a few examples about what cars he should be buying because the numbers made sense. And the response was, and this is a good operator, a good used car manager. And the reason he said he didn't buy those cars was because there wasn't any money for him. He wasn't going to make any money in those cars. So I started wondering, like, okay, so if he's not buying the cars because his specific incentive plan does not reward him for buying that car, okay, there seems to be a misalignment because the general manager wants that vehicle purchased, but the used car manager didn't align with the general manager for the car. And it goes back to how when you and I started, there was a likely more of a distribution of close to profit on the front end of the car to was the back end of the car. Sure. And that's changed. So a lot of our dealers are making $2,000 to $3,000 on the back end of the car. Where before, when I did finance, if you were at $1,000 a car in the early 2000s, you were a pretty good finance manager. Now today, with the reserves of the car being much higher, just the cost of things being greater than what it was then, it's not uncommon for the numbers to be on average $2,000 to $3,000. So the incentive should be altered so that there's an alignment between the buyer of the car and the general manager or whoever's in charge of the organization to be more aligned. So people with the right incentive plan. The next is process. We don't see a lot of consistency. We don't see a lot of persistence with process. So we're suggesting is that dealers define their process that's documented and it's focused on persistence and consistency. And when you think about working out, you think about a diet plan, you think about a business, right? All these facets in the success is always derived through consistency.
Yep.
It's not these ones here and one there. It's consistency over time. And it's going back and it's evolving the process. So are you getting the things out of your business, your process, buying cars from consumers, and what you want? And if you're not, let's identify the specific part of the process that has the biggest opportunity for growth or improvement. So it's by tracking the data. So documenting the process, looking back to see if you're getting what you want out of the business and altering the specific areas that you feel are going to get the biggest output. And then going back and revising this over time. So it's persistence over time. And the third is price, and specifically being aware of your competition. And I was talking to a performance manager for another company today, and we were discussing, he was sharing with me that he often sees misalignment where a buyer will offer 85% cost to market, thinking that they're going to be able to get that car. And the reality is, I wonder, he was even saying to me, which I was thinking, like, where can you buy a car that you can buy it at 85% cost to market? And unless it's a trade-in where you're holding something, the car they want to purchase for that, maybe in some cases, or, the service drive, great place to focus on cars. But if it's from the auction or from the street, it's not going to happen. Consumers have a lot of options today, right? If we could list off half a dozen places that are backed offers that they can get without leaving their house. So when you consider if a consumer is going to take the time, take photos, write a description, post it online, deal with people they don't know, meet them, and negotiate. If somebody is going to go through all those efforts and to think they haven't already checked Carvana or one of these other large public retailers that have backed offers, I think is absurd. That they haven't already checked what they can get. So what we're again suggesting is that the dealers really focus on people and that they're aligning their pay plans, that they're focused on the process with persistent consistency, and we'll focus on price with just awareness to what the competition is. Not that you always have to be the highest, but be aware of what the other offers are that the consumers already know.
It's funny you say that. So, for those of you guys don't know, people and process are two of the Smartwolf consultants' core values. Profits are number 3, which kind of goes into price. It kind of falls aligned to what you're talking about, is understanding what your profit strategy can be. But what I thought was interesting as you were talking is that consistency to the processes. It takes time, and then you have to go to it. Is you see a lot of people saying, okay, they want to dabble in it, or they use the word try, which I can't. The word try just sends me into the upper hemisphere, because when you try, you're just building in failure. But then they're like, okay, we did it for 2, 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is. And then they're like, okay, we're going to abandon it. Not even assessing that when you build a brand or you build a strategy, that when you do something for a small amount of time, it takes 4 to 6 months before people even know you're doing something. So when you abandon it, the ones that kind of saw it or maybe did it and then you don't do it, it just looks like you give up on things. And so it actually hurts you as a bigger brand. But then the other thing that I thought was interesting is when you're talking about the awareness, is understand what people are doing is they're like, well, we aren't going to make money or we're going to lose money. It's okay. Well, you have to reshape your business model to where maybe you have to look at your fixed ops or you have to look at your back end. I was fortunate to have a client that I want to say they averaged $400 on the front, sold a lot of used cars, and they averaged probably about $2,000, like you said, on the back end. And then they made their money in fixed ops as well, $1,400 a car of what they had to fix. So in essence, they're making $3,500, $4,000 every time a car hit but in different pieces. Well, when you sell 350 used cars, there's still an absorbent amount of profit that then comes into the store. But what I think dealers are struggling with, and that's going to be the key piece to them really understanding acquisition as a whole, is every car you take in retail. We're not talking about the ones that you push, pull, or drag in that you can't sell. But retail cars, your only ability to increase gross or your customer base is getting more trades. So every time you don't want a car, or you're like, I'm not buying that, or you find a reason why it doesn't work for you, you're taking a potential customer with a trade to even look at you. And so I think it's interesting as we look at this as acquisition, is everybody wants the everyday car, the car that they can floor, the things of that nature. And it's okay, but what is that going to drive in? Does that drive in a trade? And then every time you have somebody sitting in your showroom, purchase and or buying, right? They're selling or buying, is if they're selling the car to you, you buy that car and you look, is this a retail car? And then that's when you have to make that assessment of like, okay, we have to find a way to make this deal because we need vehicles. But then when they're there to buy something, if they have a trade, how many times do we let people leave our showroom that have a retailable trade? And we're like, well, we would have lost 500, 1,000, couple thousand. And you're like, but how much would you have potentially made, or how much are you going to lose by trying to replace the vehicle they had? So it gets more into, you have to be a lot more surgical And I think that's where the private party acquisition does, is it gives you more control. Because if we drive people into the store through private party acquisition, service drive, increased trades, however, they're doing it, isn't that the end goal? Is to have more people in your showroom to grow your customer base? Because eventually, yes, we know 9 million cars weren't made, and then we miss targets on leasing the next 2 years, which then pumps cars in. But as things get back on pace, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, if you haven't built your customer base, aren't you just leaving yourself in that same tricky void of not understanding how to then grow your business?
Well, Darrell, it's not going to get any easier. That's for sure. I don't see signs that are pointing to this becoming easier, as these large companies are amassing more and more data just to make them better at this process and experience. So for dealers that are sitting on the sidelines and are not really figuring this out, it takes years in many cases. So 2 stories. The first, you reminded me of really how the light bulb went off when I first started Van. So Van was created, this is 2011, 2012. I was piloting it in the store that I worked at. It was Toyota of Naperville. I also worked really closely with their Chevrolet store across the street. And I came across a Chevy diesel, and I don't remember the year of the vehicle. I think it was a 2007 or 6. And the vehicle was sold by a seller in Schaumburg. Now, for those that don't know the Chicagoland area, Schaumburg and Naperville, there's no direct line. It's kind of going down and over. So there's not a good path to get there. And doing business between Schaumburg and Naperville was just less common. But we brought the diesel truck into the Chevy store. The Chevy dealer bought it. So our store across the street bought the vehicle, and we sold that. And the profit margin was high. And this is going back years ago when you had a $4,000 front end. It was huge. And that had a trade. That also resulted in about a $4,000 deal with another trade. That trade was getting too far down the line, ended up going to the auction, but also resulted in a couple $1,000 auction purchase or auction profit. So there was, I think, $10,000 to $12,000 all said and done profit on this one acquisition. When you think about it, from somebody that we would have never had acquired that vehicle, we would have never have likely known the seller was coming from Schaumburg into Naperville. So you're able to meet people that you wouldn't normally have the opportunity to do business with. And like you said, you get trades. You get trades on these. Now, you're not going to get a trade on every purchase. So we get pushback from some dealers that say, I'm not going to buy wholesale vehicles. I'm like, well, buy them all. We suggest to buy all the vehicle. You take what you take. You're going to dismiss the ones, but there's a certain percentage that you're going to keep and a certain percentage that you're going to wholesale. But if you get selective about what you're going to engage with because it has to fit the retail strategy, I would ask, what vehicles do you miss out on because you didn't know? You didn't know that the car that you would have prejudged because the miles are high, maybe it's a really clean car that normally wouldn't have been on the list to retail, but how can you not? How can you send that vehicle to the auction? It's just too clean. You come across these opportunities, but if you prejudge them, you don't have the chance to engage with the sellers. The second thought is, when you actually no, the second story rather. The second story is, we deal with a dealer in rural southern Michigan, and this dealer had fought long and hard, in fact, years, to get to a certain point. It was 40 cars was the magic number. Now, for years, they were in the 10 to 15 to 20, couldn't really figure it out. But the owner of the store, the single point store, he saw to it that he knew that there was potential and knew that there was a path. Today, 7 years later, consistently buying 70 to 80 cars per month, consistently. It's taken a while for him to figure out. He has a branded vehicle that goes to the consumers. That way they can acquire them on the spot. But it's taken him through a lot of iterations to come up with what has worked for them. Now, we just passed January 10th. January 10th is National Quitters Day, I learned this year. We're going to the gym. The first couple of days, it's packed. And I'm going to the gym, and the machines are tough to get to. Treadmills, you have to wait in line. Going this morning, it wasn't as busy. It's still busy, but not as busy as what it's been. So when you talk about trying something out, for a couple months, we didn't see success. What thing of significance do you try out for a couple months and then give up because it doesn't work. It's really hard. If it's reshaping your body to get in shape for the desire that you have for some particular one, it takes time. You're not going to get it in a month, 2 months, not likely going to get it in 6 months, but are you seeing progress? And is there enough progress there that's going to give you hope that if I stay on the consistent and persistency, I'm going to eventually get to the point that I can see something down the road? And
Yeah, you know,
one more thing, Darrell, is I want to touch on one more thing before I jump over. The average that we see for success in this is about 3 to 5%.
Okay.
Success. Now, that would mean that 95 to 97% of the time, we're not having the desired outcome of buying that car. But how many people are we going to engage with that we can maybe not buy their vehicle, but we can at least give them a good experience? Again, these are people that may not know our brand. Think about the magnitude and the snowball effect of engaging with that many people that you didn't get success, at least not deemed in that specific outcome of that interaction, but calculated over time, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, are really focused on the consumer experience and optimizing that. Even if you don't buy the car, can you leave that individual off with a good experience? And that's where we see dealers that really take this serious and really start to mass the snowball. That the dealer that's buying 60 to 70 cars consistently, he doesn't go to the auction. He has a lot of customers that he is able to resell cars to, and even sell cars to that he didn't originally sell cars to. He just bought their vehicle.
Sure. You know, it's funny you say that. So when we talk about like reshaping our body, right? So they say for you to notice, right? You go to the gym, you start working out, you do all these things, you eat right. It takes about 10 to 12 weeks for you to notice, to start seeing things happen in your body, right? Where it starts coming up. But it takes people about 20 weeks before they start noticing, because then they'll see you and they'll be like, oh, your face is thinner, or you're gaining muscle, or whatever it may be. And I attribute that to like, okay, so even those things, which obviously when you make those life adjustments, it takes time. But then let's like look at it in the automotive space of when you bought a store or you buy a store. Store comes up for sale, you buy it, and you go in and you've got to either fix it, build it, do whatever you're going to do. I would love to see how many dealers, and when we air this, that comment in there saying that they were massively profitable, number one in their area in the first 12 months. They just took the store over, came in, guns blazing, and man, they had it. They had the Super Bowl playbook. Everything worked exactly as it should be, and they were making money. Not gross, net money. They were actually profitable. Maybe you find 1 or 2 out of 1,000. Because it takes time to build that. Just because you have a manufacturer tag or you have a really good independent brand, you got to be consistent. They got to come in and see that. And like you said, the consumer experience is, even if you don't buy it, and this is where I have the biggest challenge with Smartwolf and when I have clients is, hey guys, when we buy a car, and you might buy a car just like at the auction or anything else that you're like, when we retail this, it's probably going to be a $500 loser on the front, just based on the market and everything else. What we get for that investment. See, it's so illy advised of like, you're thinking of it as just one microscope rather than this huge collective, like you talked about, the experience and the snowball effect. If I got a review from that customer when we bought it and a testimonial, and then I get another customer that might have a trade, might not, but then they're talking about me, well, then we're advertising too. So there's a cost of it. Like, so yes, we might have a small loss, but then we give a shot to the back end, we get some fixed ops money. And you're rolling that is, well, that's how you grew, like anything, even if you didn't have a buying center, when we were doing the auction, those were acceptable practices back then. Some win, some lose. It was just what it was. And so I look at it as, why would we continue to go to auctions and buy cars that people didn't want, most of the time because they had problems, and then sometimes it just didn't fit their exit strategy, when we could actually have control of someone coming to our store or you going to them, getting cars, creating a dynamic interaction with a customer, and building your brand in a different way so that we don't just sell cars, we actually provide a service of buying a car. And I think where you're seeing the biggest disconnect is that's hard, Tom. That's really hard. And I would actually have to like work And, I think we were on the right track. Most stores were starting to kind of go with it. Then, of course, the fake flu got us all, and COVID came, and then we saw something that we never saw before. In 100 years, used cars appreciated in value. Never happened before. And so now everyone's like, oh, this is easy. Anyone can do this. And now we're back to the regular car market where you have to have an experience. You have to treat a customer a certain way. Like, you have to have value in order for that customer to do business with you. And so I think it's interesting that the ones that are getting it are having a lot of success, and they dictate their business. They know what they're going to get, and they drive that business. The ones that are kind of doing it, trying it, or won't do it are a slave, or they are a victim to the market, because they don't know what to expect because they're not taking control. So I think that is an interesting way of looking at it, because we do need to look at it as like it's a new business. It's not just the action. There are multiple snowball effects to everything that goes in there. Now, I know that you guys have you've decided that van wasn't enough. Like, you've got this integration, you've got this automation to be able to communicate with customers in areas, which first, let's just really quickly, before I get you led into this next thing, because I'm excited about it, is you're the OG. You came up with the first one, Vehicle Acquisition Network. And oddly enough, the best form of admiration is duplication, okay, or copying somebody. And there's other tools that have come to the party and tried to create something, or that they have something that's kind of maybe, and they all start with V. It's almost like they were just really wanting to copy you, Tom. Like, they just couldn't come up with something else, so they named it with a V to try to confuse people, right? And what I think is interesting is that what you've come up with, and I've seen all three iterations of the major competitors in the space, is the consistency and of what you do and the message you send, but also the platform, it being consistent where it doesn't break, it doesn't have issues. Like, you can depend on it. It works, right? Which is really important. So I wanted to let people know that. But you have decided that just having the platform wasn't enough. There's bigger issues in the market that you could help with, and Van could bring to the forefront to help dealers start with this acquisition. You've now created the thing called Managed Buyer. I'd love for you to tell people about that, because I think people is going to be the capital, or our how we value people is going to be the next big thing of finding the right people, finding good people, finding people that work. And you've actually created something and bringing something to the forefront that I don't think people know enough about, but it's a solution I think is going to be the thing that helps people get to the next level.
Yeah, thanks, Darrell. And touching on the names that start with V, I would say I copied that as well. So I'm not original with respect to that. When I was naming Van, I kept processing V Auto through my head, and again, I shared with the impact that Dale has had on me, and so I was seeking an acronym as well, and so I'm not original in that respect, but. We're really excited about Managed Buyer, because the main reason that we lose customers, they often will say, I don't have people, or I lost my person, or the person that I have just isn't doing it. And even when we look in the usage, we would sometimes see the dealers that would leave, like, all right, they used it at first, and then they found other things to do, right? They started focusing on ICO, or they also sell cars. They found anything else to do in the business. And it became apparent to us early that what we do, it's the hardest thing in the dealership. Like, buying cars from the street, it's the hardest thing. And when I say the hardest thing, what I'm referring to is it has the lowest conversion ratio of success.
And the most amount of work, like the most amount of
work. Yeah, so I have to talk to a lot more people to get a positive outcome, even though we'll kind of park the marketing or advertising aspect of engaging with consumers. But if 3 to 5% is success, that means that you're not succeeding 95 to 97% of the time. Like, that's a lot of work to get a lot of no's. And imagine you're a salesperson. Imagine you're a good one, and you're closing people 30 to 35% of the time, which means you have to talk to, out of 10 people, you're getting yeses 3 to 4 times. Now, if that 3 to 4 becomes, maybe I have to talk to 20 or even 30 or 40 people before I get a yes, the feeling is I'm failing. I'm doing something wrong. Okay.
Sure.
So imagine you're not a good salesman. You're a bad one. You're bad. You're closing 15 to 20%. It still feels like even a bad salesman, or maybe not bad, maybe the wrong way to label it, but a salesman that's not crushing it, right? They're at the lowest end of the list. We're getting ready to let that person go. Let's just have them buy cars. Well, that person also feels like he or she are failing. So imagine you're a BDC, like you're going through the leads and you're used to appointing at a certain percentage. This is significantly lower. So it's a whole different dynamic and mind shift of it's not failure. Like you said, it's a different business. And we often see that this is a new agenda. It's a new initiative for many stores. So if they're going to launch a new initiative, that means it's a new department in the store. It's the one that has the highest level of rejection. It's typically staffed with the lowest skilled team members. Not always, but in many cases it is. They're just trying to manage their budget accordingly. So if you're going to staff it with the lowest skilled individuals and then give them the least amount of oversight and leadership, those things are all leading to a not successful outcome. So we've looked at this and we said, all right, and we've encouraged dealers, go find, so if it's a new initiative, you're going to have somebody dedicated and focused, as we suggest. We would often recommend somebody with great attitude, because attitude is everything. Focus on good work ethic, because you have to schedule follow-up and then do it, right? You have to do that. And then good communication skills, be able to have a conversation. So
Absolutely.
If they can go out and hire somebody that has these attributes, we'll train the rest. We'll train them on how to engage, what to do, and we're going to provide them a process that will yield success. We'll give them technology that can track their activities and help them and coach them. Have a coach that will engage weekly if they want. All those things, but it's still tough. It's really tough. So with all the challenges that many dealers are faced with and all the things that I outlined, we've said, you know what? Why don't we just hire the people? So the only thing left then, and all the things that I described, is us interviewing, hiring on our standards that will execute on our processes, that will actually schedule follow-up and then do it. And, when we've dealt with a lot of stores, we'll ask buyers, hey, why didn't you schedule any follow-up? Hey, why didn't you do the follow-up? Hey, why didn't you engage with that seller? Oh, that seller was priced too high. Oh, I talked to that seller and they didn't like my offer. Well, these are things that are not acceptable by our standard. It's not acceptable to not schedule a follow-up. It's not acceptable to not do it, because if you've told a seller, I'm going to call you in 2 weeks, you must follow up, because that's your commitment. That's your word. If you've said, I'm going to call you in 2 weeks, you've got to call in 2 weeks, because we can't get on to a relationship with failed expectations from the start. That's not good business. So we've decided that we're going to hire and then hold our team members to a specific standard. And the main reason we didn't offer this kind of service in the past was because there was a whole thing about pricing. Like, how do we control the price and do so efficiently for the dealer? Because if we have to burden the used car manager for every offer on a car, there's going to be a significant bottleneck that is imposed on the used car manager that's already busy. He or she has things to do. And so we can't constantly badger him or her for offers. So we said, you know what? With the products that exist today, whether it's AccuTrade or Max Offer or some other efficient and high-end top-of-market offer, not 80% cost of market or 82%, like something that's rooted in a competitive awareness offer. So with the products that exist today that are backed, and even if the dealer doesn't like the offer, it's a backed offer. They don't have to like it. They can still write the check and go through the process and then sell it to whoever that end user was. These things that have all aligned have really given us clarity that we can do this. We've been doing this now, again, 12 years at singularly focused. We don't also do other things. We do one thing, and we do one thing well. So having the processes, having the coaches, having all the things that I've outlined, we're perfectly poised to execute on behalf of the dealers. And the only thing left then is for the dealers to do what they do best. And that's bringing somebody into the store. We'll bring them in. But once somebody has arrived in the store, and just giving them a great experience. And we feel that conversion ratio that I mentioned of 3 to 5%, if that conversion ratio is 80 to 90%, that the dealers are going to be very excited to take care of those consumers that are in their store, because the rate of conversion is going to be significantly higher than if they have to do it themselves, starting from the very beginning. But knowing that it's brought all the way down to the line, that all they have to do is give them a great experience. Maybe if that car was not properly disclosed, maybe some damages or condition, that they can deal with that in the store, and dealers are great at that. So we're really excited to roll this out, and we feel that managed buyer is going to be a success for our stores.
No, I think it was great. When I'd first heard that you were doing that, I was like, it's interesting because everybody can have their own idea of like how they want to do it, this and that, but you hear it all the time. People, and like you said, I think the one thing you didn't mention, which like we need, is like that not only are we putting the lowest people in there or the most economical based on the pay plan, is there's zero, well, we'll say little to no training on how to go about this. It's trained of like how you'd sell a car. So we're giving them sales training, which has no actual relevance to buying a car because it's a completely different conversation. And now knowing that you guys have the training and the focus, and the thing is, now you don't see the negatives. And I think for a store, that's kind of a really impactful thing, because again, we kind of get caught up in the store level. If we only see the negatives, it's hard to associate, like you said, any type of a like positive result, because they're like, yeah, 3%, 5%, like that. Yeah. But if you have 20 appointments come in and you didn't see that person had to make 1,000 calls or whatever else to get those 20 appointments, and they just show up at your store and then you close at that 60, 70, 80, 90%, now you're going like, hey, this is fantastic, right? Because it says, in essence, they aren't having to do a lot of the work, a lot of that heavy lifting that's, in the muck, so to say. And all they have to do is give that experience. And then, so now you can create a different conversation of focuses. What does your in-store experience look like? It's a true test too. Because if you drive this traffic to them and they're saying, we didn't mind. Okay, well, now it's a real mirror of, well, what does that experience look like? Because we get them to you. They know what the value is going to be, assuming they didn't, they disclosed everything properly. But I think it's great because people, what we are seeing in the industry, and Glenn Lundy just did a TikTok, Instagram about it, but it was really insightful, was human capital is like now the next shortage, or like the thing that we're going to be short on, is that you're trying to find good people that can produce results and that put in the effort, but then you step over dollars to pick up dimes because you're like, well, I don't want to overpay for someone. So then you get the cheaper or the more affordable option that doesn't produce and then hurts your brand. So it's like now finding those really good people, the workers, the ones that put in the effort. That's the next shortage. Like used cars was. Used cars is a shortage. So now you're having to pay up for it. Well, good people you're going to have to pay up for, unless you find people like you who've decided, like, you know what? I know we innovated and we had this innovation, but we weren't done. We've decided we're going to go ahead and take it to the next level. And it's not innovation, is you're just providing a solution of, we know this is an issue, so let us partner with you and solve it. And I think we have to give you that forum to obviously talk about it and then really make this a focus, because that is where people are struggling. Is, if we have people and you can find the right people to put in the effort, we know 90% of stores are good once they get there. It's getting them there, right? So solving that problem, I think you've now opened up a door for a lot more customers to feel better or go into it with hope, right? They're not going into it going like, oh man, I got to hire people. I got to do this. I got to do that. Like you've taken that immediate overwhelming stress and said, we've already got that handled. Now all you have to do is do what what you already think you're good at or you are good at. So I'm excited to see it. I think it's going to poise Van to be one of the most talked about solutions in way of like what they provide now in the year 2025. I think it's going to be great. And I'm excited to see where it's going. Now, to kind of change gears a little bit, and as the year goes on, we have a lot of things that are coming out, a lot of changes. We've got administrations, we've got all kinds of things that have changed over. In 2025, where do you see the industry? Is the industry, is this still a new car industry, or is this now become where used cars is the path to growing a store? Like, where do you see that? Because, you know, like Toyota is, I mean, let's get real. Toyota is like the only brand that grew last year. But now moving forward, do dealers really have to really tackle used cars and make that a focus, or can they survive just on new cars alone?
Well, I see used cars and new cars now are becoming a little bit of the same, in the sense of, like, if we go back before COVID, right? We were, when I was at the Toyota store last, we were deep below invoice. There were net losses to sell a Camry. I mean, pretty significant net loss. But you did that so you can get a trade, get back end, and do all the things that we've outlined already. So I see used cars becoming a little bit closer to that you're going to lose a little bit of money on the front so you can get a trade and you can get the back end profits. You can get more of this. And yeah, I see the issues I mentioned earlier is I think it's going to get more challenging. I think the profitability is going to be a focus. And I wonder, for those that are not doing this or not building some kind of a street buying strategy, where are you going to get your cars? So if you're focused on the auction, and if things get more challenging, then those prices are likely to go higher. And that would mean that they're likely larger net losses on the front to get the cars. And at what point that balances out, I don't have visibility in seeing that, but sure. I don't see anything pointing to things getting easier in the industry. As I mentioned, 9 million cars didn't get produced that are used cars now, that would have been lease returns now that are not there. So for the following period of years, it's going to be tough for dealers on used, and they're going to lean heavily as they have. You know, we've reset back to what new car prices were prior to COVID, and
Sure.
And a lot of manufacturers have. And then during COVID, many dealers said, this is fantastic. You know, the OEMs have committed to not flooding the market so we can maintain profitability. I think many of us knew that wasn't going to happen. That once one does it, they're all going to follow. And of course, I mean, they have to sell cars, and I understand the reasons why, but we're back to not making money on new cars, which puts pressure on the back end and driving used. So I see a heavy focus on used cars.
No, I agree. I think used is now where you have to make it the focus. I think acquisition has been for a couple of years, but now I think there'll still be dealers that hold out, but I think the industry has now backed the industry as a whole has been backed into a corner to where if you don't focus on used cars, make it its own segment of focus, then you're going to be struggling uphill just because new cars are back to what they were. You're discounting them, you're giving them away, they're just moving metal so they can become used. But what I find interesting in today's market, especially going into 2025, is, you know, you'll see stores that have packs and recon bills, and where no one has really started the conversation. So we'll consider we're going to, you know, Van, my company, a lot of different companies is starting every day is who is now looking to get educated, change, develop, adapt to making money in different areas to where you have to, because you're going to have to change your methodology. If you were one of the ones that are we make front end, a little bit of back, we know that's not relevant anymore. We know that that has become so compressed that you're going to have to look at how do you measure success? Because if it's just based on, making front end profit, well, then we got bad news for you. That is getting tighter and tighter and tighter every day. So is it you need to get your finance department more shots so that they can maintain money there? Is it you need to put more cars through your shop so you can maintain money there? And then the other side of that is, what are you doing in a marketing aspect? Not spending money. I'm not going to talk about putting more money into something, but do you get the reviews? Do you get the testimonials? Do you, how do you follow up with the customers? Do you have a referral program in the sense of, do you call your customers after purchase and or sell looking for referrals based on the experience? Because you're going to have to get more surgical based on what the compression's doing. Otherwise, the old school, I sell 30 cars a month and I make a lot of money, I'm not going to say that goes away. I'm sure there'll be a couple of people that can do that. But it is really one of those things of how quickly you can move it, how fast you can move it, and how many times. Because Your trades are where your profit is, but even that becomes a little bit problematic due to the car's not being built and everything else. Is if I have a 2020 on my lot and I'm selling it, what year trade is that going to bring? And then how many miles now, because so many people held on to their cars. So now you're changing mileage, you're changing years, you're changing desirability. So now it even, forget compression. If that was all we were dealing with, maybe that's okay. But now you've like lowered the years of what's going to come back into the market. For instance, you said a $10,000 Toyota Camry. And a $10,000 Toyota Camry back in the day when we were, man, those things, like you made money and they had a 5-day supply. As they went in, they came out. Well, that same Camry with 140,000 miles on it now is $19,000 with 140,000 miles on it because of how much cars are. And then that's what that gets you. And now people are going to be like, well, do I really want to pay 20 grand for a 150,000 mile car? So there's multiple challenges we're running into. And that's where I think the private party acquisition gets into is you can control that dynamic because you see it, you know what you're getting into if you use the applicable tools, as you said, that puts you into that backed offer and protects your profitability. You don't want the car? Use third-party validation so that if it doesn't fit your segment, I'm good. But I think where dealers will really need to challenge themselves is, because I've had it come up, I'm sure you've heard it as well, you talk to as many dealers as I do, is, well, I'm not going to buy a car if I can't make money on it. And I get it.
Yeah.
I probably would say the same thing, but then being on this side of it, I go, what does making money look like? Is it just you making $100, $200, $1,000? What if I bought that car? They have a CarMax offer. I match it. Can't make any money. I hit a button because I don't want it. It's like a turd. I liquidate it to them. Am I making money if I get a testimonial from them and a review from them and then using that to procure other vehicles? I would say yes, but that's the other piece of the training and developing that you have to now make it a focus. Maybe I don't get to make profit on that car, but I use the things I get from that transaction, the experience, to better my business model. So I think that's going to be really, going to be really interesting.
And think about the relationship. So the seller has a need, and they may sell to Carvana, they may sell to somebody else. Even you mentioned about selling to CarMax. Okay, even if the end buyer for that vehicle was CarMax, but you had a chance to control the relationship with that consumer, and then it came to you, you made $100 or nothing, and you sold it through Max Offer to CarMax, because maybe you wanted to pay them $400 or $500 more than their CarMax Offer to be able to sell through Max Offer. At least you get to control these relationships rather than them considering somebody else next time they either want to sell or purchase a vehicle. And for those dealers not doing this, to me, it blows my mind to allow a large competitor like CarMax to come into their market and allow them to pick cars out of their market and then resell back into it. By not buying the vehicles, they're actually opening the door for a competitor to get larger. They're buying more cars, and every quarter, or on the quarterly earnings calls, they keep buying more and more and more cars. So to sit back and allow them to do this it boggles my mind. And part of the conviction that I have is to provide services and technology to dealers to compete with Carvana. Like, as I mentioned, I started my days at 16 in the dealership. Who I am today largely is due to all the things that I learned in a dealer, allowing me to become entrepreneurial in the confines of the store. So I have a lot of conviction to help the average store out there, and to allow a competitor that labels themselves a non-dealer dealer and to pick cars out of their market and then resell them back into it. I don't understand it. So we want to help dealers to block Carvana from acquiring these cars. And again, even if that car goes to CarMax, control the relationship.
Sure. Well, and I think it's interesting when you say that, helping the average dealer, and we can kind of wrap things up kind of with this thought is, think about CarMax, right? And I like talking a lot about them only because of how many times we laughed about it. For those of you guys who don't know, CarMax, I think, is 34 this year, 33 or 34 years old of when they came out. Started with the owner of Circuit City, and if you read the story, it's really interesting because he took the same failed business model, made from Circuit City, put it into CarMax, and then voila. But what I thought was interesting is how dealers would laugh them out of the room saying one price would never work. This one price model and buying cars, this will never work. They're now the strongest used car operation in the world. They make money on every quarterly call. It's like they just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now they're selling back to you. So they'll buy the car, run their own auction. You'll be buying it and paying fees. So now you're paying double for the car you could have had. But more importantly is it only doesn't work. We thought this couldn't work. We said it couldn't work. The industry said it couldn't work. It didn't. We said it couldn't work because we weren't willing to put in the effort, the time, or the belief. And all it took was one person to say it could. Then you got another person and another person and another person, and now it's great. And we've learned a lot of things from them, and now we've adapted some things. Is for all the dealers out there that say this can't be done, I promise you have someone in your market doing it right now. They probably use van, so you should call quickly so that you can at least be competitive to your competitors. But is that you need to understand is the reason I did Street Smarts and taking it to the streets is there are so many things out there on the streets that are going to competitors and going to other places. Is why would you ever want someone going somewhere when you have an opportunity to build that relationship with referrals? And though we're recording this will come out in a couple weeks. When you guys watch this, go back and watch a podcast with a young lady named Sarah. It will be, if you don't believe what you're hearing now, go rewatch that episode. That's a customer, and it kind of goes to what Tom's saying, and that's how we're going to wrap this up. A customer was listing their car online, got contacted. Okay, one of the stores that I work with uses van, contact them, and they're the buying center. And they got tons and tons and tons and tons of people, scammers, everything else. They got blown up when they put it on the marketplace. Buying center made it quick, easy, comes in. They didn't really want to deal with the back and forth of a trade because they were looking to buy a car. They just wanted to separate it. Sold it, ended up referring within 2 months their niece, their sister to the buying center, one of which sold, the other one didn't because they ended up coming in, getting the number, but sold it private party. But the one that didn't sell ended up referring 2 more people to the buying center. So one transaction turned into 4 transactions just because of creating that experience for customers, because you made it something that was achievable, safe, and secure, assuming that that's how you build your brand. But that's where I think private party has now given the dealers control to communicate with customers. If you actually understand that, put in the work, get the managed buyer if you don't have the right people, because you want those results without the headache, and allow yourself to win, right? Winning's an attitude. Winning's a frame of mind that you have to say, I want to do this. And you immediately go into finding all the reasons why it will work, never identifying the reasons why it doesn't, right? So Tom, I want to thank you for coming on. I'm excited. Everybody I work with, I tell them they have to have van because I've seen it. My buying center back in the day when you first started, other buying centers that have been successful. I hope dealers understand that they can take control and that there's a different apparatus out there. And the fact that you've come out with Managed Buyer, I think is fantastic, because now you're talking about a software, a communication platform, a CRM, and now a people aspect, right? It is an all-in-one solution to where the dealer gets to take out a lot of the stress and still gets to enjoy the successes, right? So I think that's great. Thank you for coming on. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up, Tom?
Well, as you were speaking, Darrell, I was reminded of something that my coach often asks me. So if there's something that's important to me and we're talking about either a rock or a goal, I'll describe it, and then he'll ask me what I'm doing about it. And I'll describe what I'm doing. I say, okay, great. Now show me. I'm like, well, okay, so I have to show him. It isn't just talk. It's actually showing. I have to show whether it's emails or the specific thing. And so I would challenge dealers that say they're taking it serious. Like if it's serious and really important, you need to show it. You can't just talk about it.
Sure.
And with that, I'm very excited about the Managed Buyer and looking forward to seeing you soon.
All right, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Tom, hang out with me for
Thanks,
just a second. And guys, subscribe, follow, repost, like, and good comments, bad comments. We like to hear it all so that we can get better. And we hope you guys got at least one thing today that made you a little bit better or gives you an opportunity to get better in the future.